The fleet surged forward and reached the pocket frontier, only to find a royal capital waiting on a speck of land no one believed worthy of one. Leon Carte had already withdrawn the purge bloom Fae and the deep-water Froglin from the sea. He had left no troops on the water at all. The purge bloom Fae were too valuable to let a pack of invaders ruin them before the real fight began. Across the decks, the Ashen Crown Dynasty generals stared at the massive haven shelter in disbelief. Rage spread through them at once. A royal capital in such a tiny wasteland was an insult they could not accept. Orders were shouted. The fleet disembarked. Soldiers formed ranks and marched toward the gates to tear it down. At the entrance, the skeleton legion was already waiting. Millions of skeletons packed the gate in a white tide of bone. The moment the two sides met, the war began. Leon, Clara Shaw, and Marcus watched from the shadows. And it did not take long for them to see how strong the dynasty soldiers really were. One soldier could smash through more than 100 skeletons. They could even draw on martial manifestation power and call out dozens of matching troop forms to fight beside them. Under that assault, bones shattered by the thousands. Fragments covered the ground. The defeat of the first skeleton wave was already certain. Leon did not care. That had only been the beginning. The dynasty troops crushed the brittle skeletons, and their confidence soared. Their generals were already imagining the rewards waiting for them after they returned. Then heavy footsteps rolled across the ground and broke those dreams apart. Bone Colossus giants strode out from beyond the gates. They were 10 meters tall. Their bodies were made from piled bone. They had no flesh to wound, and no ordinary injury to fear. The generals roared that these must be the enemy's final trump card, and drove their soldiers forward again. This time the dynasty army hit a wall. Their attacks landed on the Bone Colossus giants, and did almost nothing. The giants struck back, and every blow was lethal. Soldiers broke. Formations collapsed. Men turned and fled. The generals at the rear cursed and screamed for them to stand their ground. And then those generals entered the fight themselves. Once they unleashed their strongest heavy cavalry forms, each of them rose to the level of a Lord-class life form against the top-tier heroic power of the Bone Colossus giants. They could hold their own. Given time, they would have ground the giants down. But Leon's side had never been only skeletons. While the generals were locked in battle, Leon and Clara led other elite troops around the battlefield and slipped toward the shoreline where the fleet was anchored. A small force had been left behind to guard the ships. Leon and Clara struck fast and crushed them. The fleet fell into their hands almost immediately. One dying general managed to fire a signal flare into the sky. The blast drew every eye on the battlefield. The truth hit the dynasty army at once. They had been stalled by Bone, while their ships were stolen behind them. The generals pulled their forces back in a panic and rushed for the shore, only to find the fleet already sailing away. In front of them was nothing but black water. Behind them, the recovered skeleton forces closed in and sealed the trap. The Ashen Crown Dynasty army became prey in a jar. In the end, all of them were captured and thrown into the Undercrypt dungeon beneath the royal capital. After Leon and Clara secured the fleet, they returned to interrogate the prisoners. Under torture, the generals finally revealed everything they knew. The entire war-forged dominion was under assault from monsters. At the same time, the will of the war-forged dominion was still forcing every nation to drive out all outsiders. Leon could already guess what had happened. Under invasion from an unknown civilization, the will of this world had fallen into chaos. If no one restored its clarity soon, the war-forged dominion itself might fall. The first obstacle was the corruption, black oil, being poured into the world through breaches. The Purge Bloom Fae could treat symptoms, but they could not solve the source. There were not nearly enough of them to purify an entire civilization. Yet from the captured generals, Leon learned of a method to seal one of those breachy. Clara and Marcus discussed it and made a decision. They would help. The nearest breach would be sealed first. They found sealing materials aboard the Dynasty ships, proof that the invaders had planned to deal with the breach after the purge. Leon and Clara took elites and sailed out. The breach was not far from the Haven shelter. Leon had seen it before, but until now, he had possessed no means to close it. As they approached, they saw the breach still pouring black oil into the sea at full force. The surrounding water had already become a thick, black mass, sticky enough to begin clumping together. At 3,000 meters, the ship could go no farther. The black oil dragged at the hull and tried to crawl up over the vessel. Only the protective film around the ship kept the contamination out. Leon and Clara had no choice but to take the materials and fly in, mounted on a shadow locust the size of a truck. They closed on the breach. The black oil sensed them and changed at once. Instead of pouring downward, it began spraying outward. In an attempt to cover them, Leon triggered ninefold war form and became a halfling Drakespear. Clara became a Stormbolt Thunder Sparrow. Together, they unleashed lightning into the breach. The lightning blasted apart great volumes of black oil, but only barely kept the eruption contained. They had less than a minute. Clara took the defense. Leon began setting the sealing formation, but the black oil did not let him work in peace. As he drew near, chunks of oil gathered into humanoid shapes and hurled more corruption at him. The shadow locust blocked it with its body. Then, the black oil tried to invade the creature's mind and turn it into a puppet. It failed. The shadow locust had no wisdom to seize. The corruption that entered it only transformed into energy and flowed into the dark crystal on its head. That crystal deepened in color as it absorbed more and more. Leon used the opening to complete the formation. Power surged into the breach. The opening shrank just before it sealed shut. A lump of matter forced its way out and dropped into the Black Sea below. The moment it touched the oil, it began to grow. From the size of a football, it expanded in seconds into a 10-meter black oil horror. Its body resembled a corrupted draconic beast. Black scales covered it. Its eyes burned red. Its claws were hooked, and its fangs crossed like blades. The instant it formed, it threw back its head and roared at the shadow locust. The roar shook the sea. The crystal atop the shadow locust's head shattered under the shockwave. Fragments fell. The black oil horror opened its mouth and lunged to catch them. Leon transformed into a gloombolt shadow locust, flashed through the air, and snatched every shard away. Before the monster could claim one, the black oil horror bellowed in fury. Leon returned to the shadow locust, healed its wound, and formed a thunderstrike lance. He hurled it down. The lance pierced the monster and exploded inside it, blasting away a tenth of its body. A moment later, the scattered black oil flowed back together and restored it completely. The thing did not weaken at all. Leon frowned. Strikes worked, but nothing stayed damaged if he could not find its weakness. This kind of creature would become a disaster. The black oil horror gave up on him and turned toward the ship instead. Leon's attacks and Clara's heavy shots slowed it, but neither of them could truly wound it. The ship could not be lost. Without ships, Leon's Haven shelter would never cross the endless sea and continue growing. So he changed forms again, this time into a frost cavalry form, and released a wave of killing cold. The entire oil-covered sea froze. The black oil horror froze with it. Its speed dropped. Its body locked in place before it could reach the ship. It became a statue of ice, less than 100 meters away. Leon dismounted and moved in to inspect it. He could read nothing from the creature at all, a sign that the invading civilization was no lower than the Sanctum civilization. That only made the problem worse. He could not beat it down normally. He could not kill it outright. And from the bubbles rising under the ice, and the tiny cracks slowly repairing themselves, he could tell the thing was still resisting, and would eventually break free. Clara landed beside him, and offered the answer. Use Ruin Divinity. Leon understood at once. He called forth the Dread Skull Guillotine. The blade selected the frozen black oil horror. A skull sigil appeared above it. The spectral jaws bit down, and the monster shattered into countless pieces of ice. This time the feedback from the Dread Skull Guillotine was clear. It had absorbed unknown energy. Leon's understanding of destruction had deepened. Its ruin judgment rate had risen. From 10% to 11%, that meant the black oil horror was truly dead. It also meant the power inside black oil could nourish the Dread Skull Guillotine. They broke the Black Sea's grip, returned safely, and found that the captured generals had noticed the sealed breach through the narrow windows of their cells. Yet, even then, they did not abandon their mission to purge all outsiders. After speaking with them, Leon gave up on ever releasing them. Meanwhile, Marcus had already begun buying black corruption crystal through the group network. As soon as he learned those crystals were useful to Leon, the chat erupted. Some mocked the crystals as worthless. Others begged to know what they did. Some insulted Marcus for refusing to share the information. Marcus ignored them all. He blacklisted every abuser and cut off their skeleton rentals and corpse disposal services as well. That broke them. Soon, the curses became plays. They could kill contaminated monsters, but they could not deal with the bodies. Burning them cost too much wood. Letting them rot risked infection. Marcus ignored every apology, every threat, and every desperate grovel. At the same time, he accepted trade after trade and stockpiled huge quantities of black corruption crystal for Leon. Once Leon received them, he fused the tiny fragments into a black corruption core stone, the size of a house. Then he summoned the Dread Skull Guillotine again and fed it the mass. The skull descended bit and shattered the core stone into fragments. In return, the guillotine sent him two messages. It needed time to digest the energy, and it had developed enough awareness to complain that the core stone carried too many impurities. Leon could only laugh. From then on, any future crystals would have to be refined in the sanctum with a disassembler unit before the Dread Skull Guillotine would consume them efficiently. With the breach sealed, the corruption around the Haven shelter eased. Fewer blighted monsters appeared. Leon, Clara, and Marcus all realized that staying in the pocket frontier would no longer help them much. They held a meeting and decided to sail for the Warlands continent. Marcus would remain behind as High Chancellor to keep the royal capital running. Leon and Clara would go. They loaded elites onto the captured ships and set out across the Black Tide Sea. Contaminated abyssal sea beasts attacked them constantly. Leon and Clara crushed every assault. After 5 days at sea, not only had they lost no one, they had gained several heroic undead champions. On the 6th day, Clara returned from scouting in Thunder Sparrow form with news of an island. It held ruined Haven shelter remains. Leon agreed to investigate. They anchored at the shoreline, left half their elites to guard the fleet, and led the rest ashore. From above, they saw what the island truly was. The forests hid large numbers of blight-spawn creatures. Uninfected life was being hunted without mercy. Several Haven shelter ruins had already been destroyed. Leon ordered the ruins dismantled from materials. The action drew the island's corrupted forces out in full. War followed. For 3 straight days, Leon's troops fought across the island until every contaminated creature was dead. The island became theirs. The enchanted map revealed its full terrain, along with the locations of altars and ruins. Guided by that map, Leon and Clara reached a cliff and searched its face until they found the entrance to a ruin, hidden in a crack in the rock. Corruption black oil stained the entrance. Leon entered first. He was transported to a vast platform, like a dueling arena, built atop a mountain. The troops that should have arrived with him were gone. His instinct told him immediately that something was wrong. Then a voice reached his ears. The nameless voice welcomed him as a Sanctum player and offered him a deal. It declared that the war-forged dominion was outdated and should perish. It praised its master. It promised Leon rich rewards if he helped complete the invasion. Leon mocked it openly. When it promised him the entire Warlands continent, he mocked it even harder. A being that did not even own the continent yet had no right to promise it away, and Leon had no intention of betraying an allied civilization for a lie. The nameless voice lost patience. It threatened him with the cruelest death it could devise. Then, a black oil colossus dropped onto the platform, with twin black axes in hand.